Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Africa. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Let's start with a look at today's markets. U.S. stocks tumbled at the open after disappointing results from Meta, owner of Facebook, wiped more than $200 billion from its market value. Let's not forget that worrying U.S. inflation cloud still hovering over investors. Indices on the board taking quite a hit today. The JSE and the EGX30 also following suit due to their larger international exposure. However, Kenya and Nigeria's indices bucked that trend, both closed in the green. Let's now take a look at other news making headlines. Fears mount for crew and environment after oil vessel explosion in Nigeria. The Africa Free Trade Area now set for a full rollout. And inflation in Turkey surges to the worst level in 20 years. Let's begin in Nigeria, where an oil production vessel has exploded off the coast of that country with 10 crew members on board. However, it was not yet clear if there were any casualties or how much crude might have spilt into the sea. Nigeria's Sheba Exploration and Production Company Limited said in a statement on Thursday that flames had engulfed the Trinity Spirit floating production, storage and offloading vessel following the blast a day earlier. The Trinity Spirit can process up to 22,000 barrels of oil a day and can store up to 2 million barrels at any one time. Sources say the vessel had about 50,000 barrels in storage and was not pumping crude from the Ukpokiti oil field at the time of the explosion. With the very latest update on that story, we're now joined by our correspondent, Deji Badmusi, who is in Lagos, Nigeria for us. Hi there, Deji. Really terrible news coming off the coast of Nigeria there. What more can you tell us about this latest blast, Deji?
Well, Hannah, there's been no further statement from the company other than the earlier confirmation it gave that indeed the incident happened earlier on Wednesday, and there's still no confirmation yet as to the fate of the 10 crew on board the vessel, because the company did confirm that there were actually 10 crew members on board the vessel when the incident happened. So no one is sure for now if what would have happened to the crew. We're still waiting for the statement from the company and, of course, from the regulatory authority. What the regulatory authority has said is that it has begun an investigation and that efforts have been made to bring the situation under control, but that investigation is right underway to find out what exactly caused the explosion. So that's what the latest is, Hannah.
Well, Deji, so much still needs to be clarified regarding this spill, but with regard to how much oil has spilt into the sea, has there been any talk so far of plans to mitigate the possible environmental impact of the spill?
Well, it's still early to talk about the mitigation effort for now, because first is that investigation still has to take place. A determination still has to be made as to how much, if at all, there was any spill. Of course, we have been told that that storage facility has the capacity now to store around 2 million barrels of crude at any given time. What we are getting, and this has not been confirmed by the company, and it has not been confirmed by the regulatory authorities, but sources are saying at the time this incident happened, that that storage facility, the vessel had between 50,000 to 200,000 barrels of oil there. We do not know, but obviously there might have been some barrels of oil in the vessel now, but we do not know for sure. And if that vessel the vessel now had that much of oil, then obviously you would expect that there would be spill, and the scale will be very difficult to determine at this time until that investigation is carried out. But unfortunately, this is coming just few months after We had a similar incident also in the Niger Delta, somewhere in Bayelsa State. And in that case, it took about 32 days to cap the head of the well to stop the spill. And the mitigation effort is still going on there. That has not been sorted out. And then this. So everyone is really concerned. And the biggest concern, of course, is on the likely environmental impact that this would have, especially for communities around that area. But then it's up to the investigators to look into this and find out if indeed the vessel had huge amount of oil in storage at the time this incident happened.
And Deji, that was going to be my next question, just on how regular these explosions are in Nigeria. Oil pipeline and vessel explosions are common in the country. What do authorities say about tackling this problem?
Well, of course, I mean, environmental rights groups have actually been pushing on the government to actually put pressure on these oil companies now, especially the indigenous companies now, to ensure that they improve on not just, they improve on their facilities. What we're gathering is that most times what actually causes this, of course, sabotage is a big issue, no question about that. We've seen cases where oil facilities or oil pipelines are deliberately vandalized by either militants operating in the Niger Delta region or essentially criminals. I mean, that actually happens. But in some cases, too, you have situations where the equipment and the facilities that some of these oil companies have are actually outdated and they've actually worn out, and that efforts have not been made to change them. Of course, we have groups that are, as I said, mounting pressure on the government to ensure that the companies go on to carry out a complete overhaul of their facilities. But to a large extent, most times, what we have seen in the Niger Delta region is that most times the cause of this, of incidents like this is usually the result of sabotage. And I mean, it's well documented by not just the indigenous companies now, even by the international companies operating in that region. And as you know, the government has an amnesty program to appease militants in the Niger Delta region. And for some time now, there's been relative peace in that region. We've not seen attacks on oil facilities, but of course, I mean, the threat is still there. It's still a challenge. We still have low-scale sabotage or attacks and all of that. But other than these attacks, as I said, the facilities being deployed by some of these oil companies in the Niger Delta region are actually old and should not be in use at all.
Thank you so much for all that. Our correspondent, Deji Badmos, is speaking to us from Lagos, Nigeria. Well, let's stay on the issue of oil. International oil prices are rising again as economic activity resumes in most parts of the world. Some of the benchmarks jumped to levels last seen back in 2014. Higher fuel costs are already feeding into global inflation. In South Africa, rates were raised last week. Fuel prices were also lifted overnight. Samitra Naidu tells us more.
Motorists queued up at garages to fill up their tanks before fuel prices went up. It's been a tough start to the year for consumers. Fuel prices in South Africa are back at record highs, and it comes just a few days after the Reserve Bank hiked rates.
South African consumers are going to be experiencing fuel prices, but food prices as well are going to increase. Firstly, because of the weather conditions, because they've got to be moved from farm to market, and they need transport to do that. It was not surprising when the Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee last week increased interest rate by 25 basis points. So really, it's going to be tough for South African consumers.
The rand has been performing better against the dollar, but it hasn't been enough to stave off rising oil prices.
The local currency against the US dollar has strengthened over the last couple of weeks, which is obviously encouraging. The problem, of course, is that benefit is outweighed, unfortunately, by the rising oil price, which is touching on margins we haven't seen in the last 7 or 8 years.
South Africans are slowly going back to their places of work, but they will need to pay more for transport in order to get there. International oil prices are ticking up on the back of improved economic activity. The tensions between Ukraine and Russia are also threatening to push up prices. Some traders expect Brent crude to hit $100 a barrel in the coming months.
Certainly, events in Europe and definitely events in the Ukraine as they relate to Russia's production will have an impact on that. What is going to happen in the short term, I think, is very difficult to predict. But certainly, I think it could be a rocky road ahead if those international developments play out in a negative way.
I think for South Africans, it's going to be very, very hard in the short to medium term. Therefore, it calls for households to spend wisely, to save wisely, and really play a much bigger role in the affairs of the country.
The AA has called on the government to review the fuel pricing model. Currently, a third of the fuel price is made up of levies that goes to the government. The finance minister might address this when he delivers the national budget later this month. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
We're staying in the Southern African region, and Standard Chartered is investigating allegations of misconduct by senior management at its Zimbabwe unit, more than 3 weeks after a media organization reported that the CEO had been suspended. Ralph Watungwa's suspension is allegedly linked to abuse of a foreign currency auction run by the central bank, as well as allegations of improperly authorized renovations at buildings owned by the bank. The reports and the absence of the CEO from work prompted queries by the Zimbabwe Banks and Allied Workers Union, while Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Governor John Mangudya said that he was waiting for the bank to advise him on the situation. The union says that it may call for collective action to compel the bank to disclose what is being investigated. Let's now take a look at your corporate headlines. South Africa's discount retailer Pepkor has breached the largest economy in South America, announcing on Thursday that it acquired a controlling stake in the Brazilian-based clothing retailer Grupo Avenida. Avenida has two major value apparel brands, Lojas Avenida and Giovanna, and 130 stores, mostly in the Midwest and northern regions of Brazil. Well, troubled Kenya Airways has tapped U.S.-based consultant Seabury Group to advise it on financial restructuring and a revival plan amid a government-backed bailout. Seabury has over the years been appointed by several airlines around the world, including Indian International Airlines, Jet Airways, German Air, Berlin Air, Norwegian Air, Shuttle, among others, where it has advised them on cutting losses, increasing revenue, and restructuring their debt in some airlines. Kenya Airways is expecting $176 million cash injection from the government. The American multinational technology company Oracle plans to invest $1 million to support African tech startups over the next 2 years. Cloud credits of up to $10,000 for 100 startups will be made available as part of its program. Hands-on technical support, executive mentoring, go-to-market resources, and customer engagements will also be offered for the startups. And finally, Shell again boosted its dividend and share repurchases on Thursday after fourth quarter profits hit their highest in 8 years, fueled by higher oil and gas prices and a strong gas trading performance. The company, which moved to its headquarters from The Hague to London last month, said that it expected to increase its dividend by 4% in the first quarter of 2022 to $0.25 per share. Shell shares were up 1.23% by 11:29 GMT. And those were your corporate headlines. Let's now take a short break and return. Here's what's coming up in global business. The Africa Free Trade Area now set for a full rollout. And freight charges in Tanzania rise to unseen levels due to supply chain disruptions.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business. Trade across Africa is set to see a boost under the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement this year. It comes as the Agreement Secretariat says it has made strides in finalizing the rules of origin to absorb tariffs on 88% of goods that can now be traded across borders. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafai reports from Ghana.
The Council of Ministers of Trade of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement met in Accra and took the decision to cover tariffs on 88% of goods to be traded across borders under the trade deal.
We now have defined for each of them what constitutes the minimum African content for that product to be traded between countries on the continent on the basis of preferences. That is a big breakthrough. This 2-year period of work that we've undertaken in 2020 and 2021 identified more than 850 additional products. 850 additional products for which rules of origin have been agreed.
The AFCFTA Secretariat says the tariff waiver on the selected goods will be implemented after the heads of state of the African Union approves it in February. The Secretariat says it has also set up a $1 billion adjustment fund to support member countries that are likely to lose revenue due to the cut of tariffs on the goods.
The Automobile Fund, a fund of about $1.2 billion, which again Afreximbank has made available to assist countries who want to participate in the automobile value chain, whether it is components, whether it is assembly of the vehicles.
While the tariff waiver on the 88% of goods has yet to take effect, traders want more engagement with port authorities and customs officials at member countries that have signed the AFCFTA deal. They believe it will help in the smooth movement of goods across borders while boosting intra-African trade. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Well, over in East Africa, importers and exporters in Tanzania are facing higher freight rates for shipping containers, fueled by a rise in demand in other global markets. Data from Tanzania Freight Forwarders Association shows that freight charges for a 20-foot container have risen by 233.3%, and that's compared to rates that were applied pre-COVID-19. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has the details.
When Dylan Sika started his logistics company 2 years ago, he had big dreams to expand and grow. But COVID-19 has put a halt to those plans after the cost of clearing containers skyrocketed. He says before COVID-19, the cost of shipping a 20-foot container from Guangzhou, China was $1,800, but now it's $6,000 for a container of the same size, causing some clients to stop importing and others to reduce the number of goods they bring in.
So this has caused us to minimize the number of workers, to expand the office, or we find like a week or 2 weeks, no work to do. We just came to the office and stay. So we used sometimes we use our savings to run the daily life.
The cost rise is caused by growing demand of vessels and containers from China to other parts of the world, especially Europe and America. Officials here say Chinese container companies prefer shipping to countries like the US, where each container costs up to $30,000. The head of Tanzania's Freight Forwarders Association says this is affecting the availability of containers in sub-Saharan Africa.
But before COVID, you just add the freights, $1,800, so that you can calculate taxes to be paid. But now, after COVID, you will add maybe like $6,000 instead of $1,800. So you find the CNF, the cost and freight, has gone high. Automatically, even taxes will go high. At the end of the day, even the consumers will now, the end consumer will now be the one who is suffering in terms of paying these costs.
The drop in containers from China is affecting thousands of businesses in Tanzania. China is the largest project contractor in the country, with investments ranging from a number of sectors, including retail, mining, and agriculture.
Our major import country for all these regions definitely is China, and also the major exporting destination is China too, in terms of minerals, in terms of cereals and other stuffs.
The UN Trade Agency has warned that global consumer prices will rise until shopping supply chains are unblocked and port constraints and terminal inefficiencies are improved. According to a report by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, the demand for goods surged over the last 2 years as consumers spent their money on goods rather than services during the pandemic lockdowns. It's hoped as 2022 progresses, the prices would stabilize and bring relief to the sector. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Over in North Africa, Tunisia's economy and planning minister has announced that his country needs to increase its exports to the African market. Faced with a shrinking local market, the government's vision is now focused on boosting Tunisia's exports to boost economic growth. CGTN's Adnan Shwashi reports.
Tunisia relies heavily on its exports of goods and services. However, these exports are concentrated in a limited geographical area and are not very diversified. Tunisia's exports to the African market represent only 10% of the country's total exports, of which 2.6% are destined for the sub-Saharan African region.
Tunisia have a lot of assets which can value in the African country. Africa is the future. The last reserve of growth is in Africa. The population of average 17 years old and a lot of potential in infrastructure in all industry.
In 2021, the Tunisian government launched an ambitious project for SMEs, enabling companies to exploit the commercial potential of markets in sub-Saharan Africa. The initiative enables businesses to work together in exporting goods and services by promoting public-private partnerships.
Tunisia economy is sufficiently developed to benefit from this expertise and make benefit other countries from it also. So we have the example of Steg International for example, which are already equipping many African countries, but we identified several other industries like pharmaceutical and medicine. We have BTP, the real estate and construction. We have education. ITC, where we have Startup Act now, which is duplicated in several African countries, and we have agro-business.
Experts explain that with state support, Tunisian firms will be in a better position to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 crisis by boosting exports.
The post-COVID recovery has created an opportunity for Tunisian companies. It's characterized by our proximity, continuous supply chain and supply guarantee. Tunisia's exports would be in a strong position if the state seizes this opportunity to boost the economy.
To boost exports to Africa, the government of Najla Bouden intends to put in place incentives for Tunisian companies to encourage them to invest in promoting sectors. The short-term mechanisms for export and the internationalization of companies concern economic diplomacy and air transport.
According to the Trade Ministry, the integration of Tunisia into COMESA has improved its exports to Africa by 8%. Authorities in Tunis also plan to reinforce the country's role in other regional economic communities in Africa. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The African Union has called on member states to ratify the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement for its speedy implementation. The 40th ordinary session of the African Union Executive Council kicked off on Wednesday in Addis Ababa. Foreign ministers of member countries and senior officials of several organizations on the continent are participating. In his opening address, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, highlighted critical issues that needed the attention of the AU and its member states. One of the key issues is the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Regional integration has in fact made progress, among others, the operationalization of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The operationalization of this AFCTA will also enable the free movement of persons in the continent. Pending the ratification of its adoption is slowing the process of entering into force. You can realize that we need to make more efforts.
The number of food insecure people on the continent increased. Africa is not on track to meeting the Sustainable Development Goal 2 target to end poverty and ensure access by all to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food.
The African Union is also implementing policies that would ease air travel across the continent. Part of the measures are aimed at reducing taxes to make air travel affordable.
We want to use this opportunity and we continue advocating for the acceleration of implementation of the single African air transport market, and we are starting a study with AFCAC calling for the reduction of taxes on air transport, again to promote air transport within Africa, in addition to so many other measures that to promote the single African air transport market, and to harmonize the requirements and regulations, at entry. And of course, you all know of this platform, the digital platform, called Trusted Travel. And Trusted Travel is a platform that was developed thanks also by CDC, Africa CDC, but also with the help of African private sector.
Meanwhile, the AU says there has been a sharp rise in the number of hungry people across Africa. According to the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, over 250 million people on the continent are going hungry, with COVID-19 and climate change only worsening the situation. CGTN's Daniel Arab-Moy reports.
The African Union is set to launch the Year of Nutrition amid worsening levels of hunger and malnutrition. Latest statistics from FAO indicate that 282 million people are hungry, with barely anything to eat. The United Nations estimates that food prices in sub-Saharan Africa are now 30 to 40% higher than the rest of the world, taking into account comparative levels of GDP per capita. According to the African Union, food prices have been on the rise, hitting the highest percentage points of inflation, standing at 133.7 last December.
The rising food prices pose threats to our purchasing power, but also cause social unrest, as we only too well remember from the 2008 crisis.
It's also feared that progress in achieving several sustainable development goals could be at risk, particularly those touching on poverty and hunger. The situation is said to have worsened due to the impact of climate change on food production.
The way we are addressing problems of peace and security, we should add the nexus, climate change and food security. It's very, very important. Unless we do it, we will not come out of the food insecurity on our continent, and the number of people that are starving, hungry people in Africa will augment, will grow.
There are concerns that many of Africa's staple foods will be severely affected by climate change, leading to reduced yields. For countries in East Africa and the Sahel, droughts are already the new normal. Daniel Arab-Moy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Egypt's central bank left its overnight interest rates unchanged at a meeting of its Monetary Policy Committee on Thursday. This as the apex bank said that it expected much of the economy to expand in the near term and inflation to remain in check. The committee kept the deposit rate at 8.25% and the lending rate at 9.25%. Yasser Hakim has the latest on this report from Cairo.
The Central Bank of Egypt has opted to keep rates unchanged for over a year now, at 9.25% lending rate and 8.5% for deposits. It had gradually cut rates from a high 20% in 2016 down to the current rate in November 2020. In its statement, the central bank felt inflation is at safe levels of around 7%. But experts say there are other factors as well that kept rates on hold.
We do still have the highest real interest rate in the region. Our treasury bonds and our T-bills, they give an interest rate of around 10.5, 11.5. If we remove the inflation, we have a real interest rate between 3 to 4%. Second thing is that the Federal Reserve in the United States signaled that it will not increase interest rates until March. So there is no reason that we be proactive and start increasing interest rates now. We have a stable foreign exchange rate, and that is backed by foreign reserves.
Though Egypt's real interest rates are one of the highest in the world, some experts say it might be pushed further to counter the U.S. Federal Reserve's expected rate hikes in March.
I believe that in Egypt, we will not rush into increasing rates very fast. We might be increasing it between 0.5% to 1% throughout the year. One of the other reasons that we might be doing that is we do not want to really increase interest rates too much, because that's not business friendly. And the government now, Egypt Vision 2030, is to encourage the private sector.
While upping yields could keep the Egyptian market attractive for bond investors, some analysts warn this step can be detrimental to the economy.
Raising interest rates has a negative effect on the business climate because most of the liquidity in the economy will be deposited into bank certificates. If the interest is low, it will reduce the cost of loans for companies to help them expand. The higher interest rates will not only negatively affect the private sector, but also the public debt cost, which in turn will widen the budget deficit and slow down economic growth.
The Central Bank of Egypt might have kept rates on hold this session, but developments in the U.S. could dictate how the bank will approach its fiscal policy in the next few months. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's now take a short break. Here's what's still to come. Inflation in Turkey surges to the worst levels in 20 years. And the world's leading music streaming service takes a hit following a controversial podcast on COVID-19 vaccines.
Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's recap on the hour's top stories. West African leaders held a key summit in Ghana's capital, Accra. The meeting was to assess the outcome of 2 missions to Burkina Faso following a coup there in January. Military chiefs from ECOWAS flew to Ouagadougou on Saturday. On Monday for talks with the junta, delegates say that the junta seemed very open to their suggestions and proposals made. The junta says it has restored the constitution in Burkina Faso and on Wednesday lifted a nationwide curfew with some restrictions on nightlife. Well, turning to the DRC, the country's special representative and head of the AU liaison office discussed a tragic militant attack on an IDP camp. The assault took place in Ituri province and left at least 70 people dead. Speaking from the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Josephine Mayuma Kala called on the international community to help bring peace to the country. South African authorities have announced that people who test positive for COVID-19 and show no symptoms are no longer required to isolate. The country has also reduced from 10 to 7 the number of days of isolation for those who show symptoms. According to a statement issued by the health authorities, there has been a substantial increase in the number of people with immunity against COVID-19. The announcement coincided with the reopening of schools and the removal of the 1-meter social distancing rule. And finally, the U.S. President Joe Biden says the leader of ISIS has been killed during a raid in Syria. The operation took place in the northwestern province of Idlib. Biden said that Abu Ibrahim al-Hashemi al-Qurayshi blew himself as U.S. forces closed in on him. Al-Qurayshi took over as head of the militant group in 2019, just days after his predecessor died during a U.S. raid. And that was a recap of our top stories. Let's head over to Turkey now, where inflation there rose to a 2-decade high of near whopping 50% in January, as the currency crisis decimated people's purchasing power and complicated President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's path to re-election. The stronger than expected 48.7% rate followed a year-on-year rise of 36.1% in December, and that's according to Turkey's stats agency. The reading came out just days after Erdogan changed the head of the state stats agency for the fourth time since 2019. President Erdogan rejects the idea that inflation should be fought by hiking the main interest rate, which he believes causes prices to grow even higher, the exact opposite of conventional economic thinking. He admitted on Monday, though, that Turks would have to carry the burden of inflation for some time. Well, moving on to Britain, where the Bank of England has decided to increase interest rates at its February meeting amid surging inflation. The BOE lifted its bank rate by 25 basis points to 0.5%, as was expected. The decision came on the heels of December's rate hike, marking the first back-to-back borrowing cost increase by the BOE since 2004. The BOE forecast in December that inflation would peak at around 6% in April, but in December alone, prices already jumped by 5.4%, the fastest pace in almost 3 decades. Well, Spotify is in the spotlight this week as it finds itself in the middle of a battle over COVID-19 misinformation. Prominent artists are removing their music from the platform in protest over a controversial podcast by Joe Rogan. Karina Huber has more.
Last week, Neil Young announced he was removing his music from Spotify, the world's largest streaming music service. The singer says Spotify is spreading fake information about COVID-19 by hosting a wildly popular but controversial podcast by Joe Rogan. The podcast often features vaccine and COVID-19 skeptic guests.
And when it's spreading on a big platform like that unchecked, it does create a sense of false balance and people don't know what to believe. So they'll believe the misinformation instead of the public health guidances.
Dr. Wallace co-authored a letter signed by 270 scientists and health providers calling for Spotify to moderate misinformation on its platform. That letter spurred Young and other artists, including Joni Mitchell, to end their relationships with Spotify. The White House weighed in on the controversy.
So our hope is that all major tech platforms and all major news sources, for that matter, be responsible and be vigilant to ensure the American people have access to accurate information on something as significant as COVID-19. That certainly includes Spotify.
In response to the backlash, Spotify's CEO announced it would implement content advisories for podcasts that discuss COVID-19, directing listeners to information with data-driven facts. Rogan said he would make efforts to be more balanced in his show.
But critics say that's not enough. There is the risk that more artists could join in the protest and leave Spotify or direct fans to competing platforms. There's also the risk that listeners could boycott Spotify. This, of course, would not be good for the company's bottom line.
But so could losing Joe Rogan. Analysts say Spotify is in a tough spot.
The controversy around Joe Rogan is a test case for Spotify, and it's a really difficult balancing act. On the one hand, it relies upon artists for the vast majority of what it is today, but it relies on podcasts for what it hopes to be the majority of what it will be in the future.
Karina Huber, CGTN.
Well, China Media Group has unveiled a new state-of-the-art live streaming studio on a high-speed train. The train connects Beijing with the Winter Olympics co-host city of Zhangjiakou. The innovative studio also showcases China's breakthroughs in multiple cutting-edge technologies. Aaron Liu takes us for a ride.
This is one of the most advanced studios in the world. It's embedded on a high-speed bullet train. The live transmission is stable even while the train is moving.
The striking feature of the 5G Express is the 5G Ultra HD Studio embedded on the train, which adopts full IP technology and is equipped with 3 fixed cameras, 2 landscape cameras on both ends of the train, and a mobile camera. The makeshift studio mainly serves to provide live interviews.
This is 5G plus 4K kit developed by the China Media Group. We all know that signals on the high-speed train were very poor before, but now they have overcome the challenge to ensure the stable 5G transmission from the train, even at top speeds of 350 kilometers per hour.
The system supports 12 channels of video and audio signal access, providing a full range of services for video monitoring, guide cutting and production. In addition, the mixer module and the subtitle module can assist in the production of more exciting programs, enabling the simple system to provide professional services.
With the accelerated large-scale commercialization of 5G, Ultra HD video is becoming one of the first application scenarios for 5G.
5G plus 4K and 8K UHD cloud outdoor broadcasting is one of the key projects of the Beijing Winter Olympics. It can realize low threshold and low-cost professional-grade OB services. Cloud technology can be used on-site without OB vehicles and a large number of staff.
China Media Group is leading the development and release of the relevant standards in 2021, which will significantly enhance the TV audio-visual experience.
For example, the AVS3 standard used in the 5G plus 4K and 8K live broadcast has been developed entirely by China and is now recognized by the international standards organizations.
Let's go back to the market to take a look at how commodities have fared today. Some slight losses in commodities as well, but overall nothing to signal alarm really. Agri-products, cocoa and coffee seeing some gains today. Another reminder that while we may see some jitters in the markets, we're definitely not in a bear market. Overall, global markets are currently not experiencing prolonged price declines, which tells us that the bear is not in the woods yet. Let's now take a short break and return. Here's what's coming up. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization rolls out a fish farming project in Zimbabwe.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Djibouti, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In its latest report made public this week, the World Health Organization has shed light on the problem of increased waste caused by the coronavirus. It estimates that 87,000 tons of personal protective equipment and 140 million test kits ordered via the WHO have ended up as waste. The WHO has called for reform and more investment in medical waste management globally to face this environmental and health crisis. Yasser Hakim reports on the situation in Egypt and the efforts to deal with this new crisis.
There are growing concerns in Egypt about handling the country's increasing medical waste. The government has been seeking to find the safest and most efficient ways to deal with the huge pileup of waste since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, such as used syringes, old personal protective equipment kits, and empty vaccine bottles. Health authorities hope to minimize the risk posed by such hazardous waste.
The volume of medical waste in Egypt is about 3.5 million tons, coming out of about 336,000 medical facilities, from hospitals to labs, clinics around the country. In 2020,
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi ratified a new law that established a waste management unit to ensure the safe treatment of waste through recycling, for instance, and for medical waste. How to sterilize the dangerous waste. Personally researching the successful Chinese experience during my visit to China, how they manage this complicated system, the huge plants and capabilities and technology in this field. My plan focuses on cooperation between China and Egypt so that the transfer of knowledge and technology will greatly benefit our waste management and recycling strategy.
This plan, alongside other initiatives, is expected to be implemented by the government in 2022 to upgrade its capabilities as the North African country continues the fight against the persistent coronavirus pandemic. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Zimbabwe's aquaculture sector has yet to take off despite the country's abundant water resources. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization is set to start a project to improve food security by expanding tilapia farming, which is expected to contribute to poverty reduction and stimulate economic growth.
Zimbabwe has over 12,000 dams, making it ideal for fish farming. The aquaculture sector produces 10,500 tons of fish a year, at a value of $31 million. Nearly 80% of the fish farmed are the Nile tilapia.
The fish stay on the water for anything from 6 to 9 months, and then they grow up to 3 to 600 grams or 800 grams, depending on what a customer might require.
But many smallholder fish farmers are looking to tap in to this lucrative industry. But it's not an easy space to navigate.
With my family, we work together almost every day. It's like we're a puzzle. When I entered into the tilapia farming, I thought it was an easy thing to do, especially when we started on the construction of ponds. I thought we can just use our picks, our hoes to make the ponds. But later on I discovered that there was need for bigger machineries like excavators.
Many smallholder fish farmers lack proper knowledge, training, money and equipment.
But the biggest issue for any tilapia farmer is feed. So feed constitutes 60% of your cost of production.
The UN Food and Agriculture Organization hopes to unlock the potential of smallholder fish farmers. This year, it will implement a global initiative called Fish for ACP.
Fish is very important for the economies of the countries of this region as a source of food, as a source of income, as a source of livelihood, as a source of job. But the fisheries and aquaculture sectors have not been able to reach the full potential that they could in these regions. And not only have not been able to reach the growth that they could have, but as well the benefits that they generate do not always reach those communities that need the most.
The goal is to make fisheries and aquaculture value chains in Africa, the Caribbean and the Pacific more sustainable. The initiative hopes to increase consumption of tilapia in Zimbabwe by decreasing production costs, so it's not a puzzle for small farmers. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
Nigeria has recorded enormous growth in the digital space in recent years. However, that growth has not been even across the country. The northern Nigeria is still lagging behind in digital literacy. One IT startup in that part of the country has taken up the challenge to change the narrative. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmosi with that story.
Meet the man who's taking up the rather daunting task of bridging the digital gap between the north and south of Nigeria. In a part of the country where digital literacy is low and in some cases considered a luxury, Raphael Issa is not only trying to help young people from the north acquire digital literacy skills, he's also empowering them to secure their future through technology. And he's succeeding. When he launched GraceSoft back in 2015, a session like this was hardly packed. But today, more young people in his base in Kaduna, northwest Nigeria, are signing up to his digital literacy initiative.
We're trying to achieve proper structure for MSMEs, trying to see that startups are properly structured, especially those of them that are tech inclined. We're trying to see that we are able to solve our own problems right here in the north using technology. The good thing is that as of now, we have a governor who is tech inclined. He's tech savvy, someone who appreciates technology, and his government has done quite a lot of things that shows that, yes, indeed, technology is the way forward.
Issa has since gone on to create different arms of Greysoft to address different challenges. Today, there's Grey Tech, which builds applications to solve various problems. Grey Create focuses on filmmaking and creating local content. And then there's also Grey Hub, which serves as an incubator and co-working space for startups and provides mentorship as well.
When startups are starting, their greatest challenge, one of their greatest challenge, of course, will be to rent a facility. They don't even have money. They're just starting, right? And they can't recruit the proper team that they need at that level. They can't afford to pay salaries. When you come to they can't buy 24-hour electricity, neither can they buy 24-hour internet service. So when you come to this place for a very small token, right, you have access to Grey Hub. So you can have access to 24-hour electricity, 24-hour light. You can have meetings with your clients in this place. You can have access to our business incubation and acceleration programs. You can have access to our business mentors. You have access to informal teams. And that means that the next person sitting by your side is just able to answer the next question that you're looking for someone to do for you.
Step by step, Issa is making great strides in providing digital literacy through Greysoft. The number of young people in the north enrolling in Greysoft is growing, and so is the number of startups springing up in that part of Nigeria.
So as more people come into tech in the north, you know that it brings about accountability, it brings about effectiveness, it brings about transparency, and it brings about resourcefulness. So by 2025, one of the things that will really satisfy us is to see that we have empowered well over 100,000 people. And we're trying to see that more people will come to understand that with the requisite knowledge of digital literacy, with the right level of digital literacy, they can, as a matter of fact, have a better life.
Bridging the digital gap between the north and south of Nigeria certainly requires a painstaking and consistent effort, knowing that the south is not slowing down in its expansion of digital literacy. But Issa has started a marathon race with Greysoft, and he says he will not slow down in his quest to drive digital literacy in a region that badly needs it. Deji Bademosi, CGTN, Kaduna, Nigeria.
And now for a final look at the markets with Forex trade. A mixed bag of how currencies on the continent fared today. The Naira, Kenya shilling, and Ghana cedi all losing some value against the US dollar. The CFA franc gained the most on the board, though, strengthening almost 8% against the US currency. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business. Remember that you can send your feedback to contact on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. For me, Hannah Viviers, and the rest of the Global Business team, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next time.